we have sailed into treacherous waters, into the edges of the planet, and we've captured a wizard who seems to know some things about questions that we have, including gold and capturing pirates. And, well, we lured him in, and we have questions for him tonight. Welcome to the Mosaic Ark. Mr. Alexander Macris, thank you for joining us. Yeah, so we've captured you. You're in it. You're in for the evening.
Yes. I'm in a dungeon.
In our dungeon, in the hold of the Mosaic Ark, right? And we have some questions, right? Now we
All right.
I have your file. I've done some extensive research here. I have your file that you've had quite the career. Graduate from West Point in history? Is that
I didn't graduate. I did 2 years.
He didn't graduate.
I did 2 years at West Point.
He did not graduate.
Yeah.
He went to, wait, you're wearing the shirt.
Oh, no, I graduated from Harvard Law School. I didn't graduate from West Point.
Magna cum laude, I hear. Are we meant to be impressed?
No.
Come on. So, no, well, I have some other things that maybe we are meant to be impressed about in my file here. A founder of an MMORPG consulting group. I have no idea what that means. I think you're casting spells against us here. And 2 main media websites, Warcry and The Escapist. I've heard tales about The Escapist. There's gates involved. No, wait. You apparently have had other websites, break.com and everyjoe.com. These are men's lifestyle websites.
That's correct.
And you founded in 2011 Autarch LLC, and a mere 13 years later, like November. Oh, yeah, maybe it's not quite 13. 13. I think that's a very significant number. Yes. Ran a Kickstarter. This number cannot be real, because we run Kickstarters and we know how hard it is. I think you fudge these numbers. It's 6 of them. 333010.
Yes. You know, all it takes me to overnight.
And you also apparently blog on Contemplations of the Tree of Woe.
Yes.
We have questions.
All right. I'm prepared to answer your questions.
Are you sure? Are you sure? You are here in this dungeon with us. Is there anything you would like to add in your defense?
Please don't torture me.
We're women. You're doomed no matter what we do, right? It's
all right. Well, I've got a cup of coffee. I'm going to just try and power through.
You run these. What are these men's lifestyle websites? Do you know what goes on in our neck of the woods here at Unauthorized TV? At least sometimes actually in this timing slot when, our well, he is said to be called the Supreme Dark Lord, but we understand you are a Dark Lord too. So one day we want this done, right? We want the duel.
No. He's a Supreme Dark Lord. I'm a Dark Lord, right? So it's like,
Fair.
it's like an archbishop and a bishop. It's not a.
You're a mere bishop of a Dark Lord.
Yeah, exactly. I'm more of a bishop. He's more of an archbishop or a pope, I think, in terms of dark lordness.
Well, we hear he keeps running away because he's a Sigma, and he'll abandon the team at any given moment because he recognizes that everybody is going. We hope you're an alpha, because we're going to have a lot more fun with that. If you're a mere Bravo, we may we'll still make goo eyes at you.
Well, my wife tells me I'm a Sigma, so
we are doomed.
Yeah.
Doomed.
Yeah. We'll see
well,
what
in
happens.
any case, among the audience, of whom we have a giant crowd tonight for us, on unauthorized TV. I'm not telling you how many because it'll depress you. It's huge. Maybe we'll hit double digits tonight. On the one hand, we've been having a lot of conversation about men and women and relationships therein, and we may actually, as ladies of the Mosaic Ark, have some questions that direction. But we've also, in this tiny little corner of the internet, had huge debates in theology. And we're really eager to talk to you about some of these theological claims that you seem to be making.
Don't you have like a PhD and a professional job teaching in this area?
That's how do you think I learn stuff? I ask people questions. Just call me the Inquisitor, right? I ask questions, I get knowledge.
Okay.
It actually works really well.
Okay, I just want to mention that I run a Conan themed blog, right? So let's.
What do you think?
Let's just maintain.
You have a law degree from Harvard and you're wearing the shirt. We expect a high degree of intellectual conversation tonight.
Well, if you'd like me to talk to you about my experiences at Harvard Law, I can give you a very high degree of expectation.
Phooey. Hey, you will notice that as much experience as I have running class, Mr. Macris here has deep and intense experience running games. And if I'm trying to out-improv him tonight, we're done.
It's true. Everything I've learned in life, I learned running dragons.
Well, okay, so this is, I wanted to say serious, but it's not going to work. We do actually have some, we've been reading through the Contemplations and the Tree of Woe, and your woeful ones we appreciate. I think we've actually referred to you many times now on the Mosaic Ark already for the world system essays that you did, things on the Mackinder thesis and things like that. So that's been covered. We here on the Mosaic Ark sail the waters of the world island versus the world ocean. Just so you know,
awesome.
we're right there. And in our Ark world schema, we understand the power of spice and the drug trade and the control of ports for sure, right? So you're among knowledgeable pirates here, we hope.
Good.
Well, at least one. I feel like a freshman taking like a 400 level course right now. So
what? I barely introduced him. No, okay. So Casey is here to make sure that my questions make sense, because otherwise I'm talking to myself, right? And this is so we're going to start here. One, I did some extensive research in looking at your videos. And I understand that you have a theological theory of game mastering.
I liked that. I liked that a lot. That was.
Are you
really
talking my theology of Saint Gary Gygax?
Well, there was that, but then there's the introductory video you did on how game masters are not God, or are God, or not storytellers, right? They have to be judges.
Right.
We're definitely in for being judgy tonight.
Yes. Oh, I know what you're referencing. There's this whole question about, okay, so the game master is the god of the game world. The game master is also the adversary of the players. He has to control the monsters because there's no computer to do it, right? It's a tabletop game, and so someone has to actually control them. And it creates this interesting situation, right? Because is the game master running Dungeons and Dragons or Axe or what have you? Is he actually supposed to want the players to lose the way you want to lose.
See,
And
you're
my point
already
was,
speaking a language that's far outside of our kin here. We know World Island and pirates.
oh,
Start over on
I-
what
I'll
the
stop now.
tabletop
Yeah.
game is.
I've been subjected to a copious amounts of descriptions of D&D because I have a teenage son
Very good.
who loves playing it.
Very good.
yeah. All right, here we go. I'm going to teach you guys how to play
yes.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes,
You
very
ready?
good.
Okay. So right now, where you're sitting, you hear on your door, wherever it is near you, you hear on the door, you hear a heavy scratching and the sound of something breathing heavily. And occasionally it says, brains.
Draw my
What do
sword
you
on the
do?
wall and kill it.
Okay, see, we're playing a role-playing game. So what would happen would be I would say, okay, your character grabs the sword from the wall and you advance over to the door. Roll initiative. And then we would roll dice to see who gets to act first. Zombies have a penalty to initiative because they're slow and clumsy. So odds are you would win the initiative roll. So then you would say something like, I use my movement action to open the door and then I stab the zombie. Or you could just say, I open the door and stab the zombie if you're a new player and you haven't yet learned the lingo. And so then what we would do is we would resolve that with a die roll. We would say, okay, Rachel, roll a 20-sided die, and you need an 11 or higher to hit, or an 8 or higher, or whatever the number is based on your character. No, because there's no, you don't win anything.
Well, the game.
I
Well, you
thought
win the
it was
game.
okay. So the one time I played, we went for the gold and we all died in the first scene. So this, I mean,
that can definitely happen.
Virtuous games?
Are they virtuous? It's a good question. I would say they are virtuous if you subscribe to, more of the ancient virtues. They are not necessarily virtuous from the Christian turn the other cheek virtue. They're more a little more Old Testament, kick down the doors, kill everybody type of virtue.
Okay, now you're in trouble. One, you know what's going on the internet right now, and people are having a big debate about the relationship between the Old Testament and the New Testament. We will say it in those terms.
Okay.
Why wouldn't Christians be able to behave properly in these games?
Oh, no, they totally can. In fact, there are some people that argue that that Dungeons & Dragons is actually an inherently Christian game. I mean, Gary Gygax was himself a Christian. The alignment system is all situated from essentially a Christian point of view, where a chivalric Sir Galahad is lawful good, and then you can stray into neutral good, lawful evil, chaotic evil, etc. from there. There's like this brief period of time when you have when you still have kind of like the honor culture and the desire for imperishable renown and the warrior aesthetic of the pagans, but it's kind of blended with the compassion, love, and hope of Christianity, and you get like the chivalric knights and the Crusades and things like that, right? And the high ideals of chivalry and King Arthur. And so I think if you're a Christian who could enjoy King Arthur, then yes, you absolutely could enjoy Dungeons and Dragons or any other role-playing game, because you can play that kind of a heroic paladin figure. But if you are one of the sort of Christians who is a pacifist and believes in nonviolence and all, you should always turn the other cheek, and if you live by the sword, you die by the sword, then I think you probably would be kind of repulsed by Dungeons and Dragons, because it really is about living by the sword and dying by the sword. It's a game of heroic combat and action.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
So I'm now cascaded into 5 layers of question here. One, I'm interested.
Okay.
I think this is cool to think about virtues and what they are and which virtues work. 2, and this, I'm actually unfortunately already quite serious. One of the things we do for our Dragon Common Room is a newsletter each week, and this past week I did a newsletter on Jesus is Lord, because everybody's talking about it. And one of the things I specifically said was about turn the other cheek, and how I think it actually is a lesson in that Jesus is actually a fight master. I think. So some of what we tend to sort of ascribe to Christian virtue, it's not just in the chivalric sort of rubric that I think there are Christ-like virtues that are in fact more not combative necessarily, but able to sustain themselves in competition than people often claim. So let's start with the virtue. Like you started with saying that the role-playing games have particular virtues, and you contrasted the sort of Old Testament warrior virtues with the what we think of as a Christian virtue. But the Old Testament, I mean, one, are we actually... See, I went way theological way too fast. Are we actually thinking of the Old Testament is at odds with the New Testament when you say that? We're not
I don't want to make
right?
Like, I don't want to make some sort of claim like that. No. I'm more classical virtues: courage, prudence, fortitude, versus hope. I believe, what is it? Hope, love, and charity are the three Christian virtues. Faith, love, and hope.
Faith, love, and hope.
Yeah, faith, love, and hope. Yeah. So that's kind of what I more meant to like if you think about King David or someone from the Old Testament, there feels like there's a stronger emphasis on the classical virtues. And obviously the Jewish tradition is different from the Greek tradition. So I'm sort of applying this Greek lens to a non-Greek topic. But anyway, that's all I meant. Not trying to start a Marcionite heresy or anything.
You actually believe that Christ is in the Old Testament, which we are going to prove in one layer of this conversation tonight.
Now, Rachel, I think you're asking is being a Christian inherently pacifism?
Right.
Does it have to in every situation? Is the God of the Old Testament different from the God of the New Testament? The answer, of course, is no. You can't be totally pacifist or militaristic. It's got to be situational.
Right.
Right.
And I think so. I think maybe stepping back is like one of the things, Alexander, I like about what we've talked about in the past is it seems to me that with your training in game design and thinking through the sort of situations that you started us off with and such, you actually are training yourself, I would say, in fight, right? But it's an emotional and cognitive, strategic situation. I mean, I know you didn't graduate from West Point.
Absolutely.
But
several of my friends that were in the War Games Club, we used to meet every weekend. We played role-playing games and war games, and I was the only one who resigned. They all stayed at West Point and had very successful careers as military officers. And all of them have told me they feel like they often learn more from playing war games and role-playing games at the club than they did from most other activities they undertook as cadets.
Why, right? It's like that you have to create your character. You gave my character a choice with there's the scratching on the door. What do you do? The constraints of probability with the die, but that I have to make. I mean, what it seems to me that's fundamentally like theologically interesting about role playing games is you as game master presenting the players with situations they have to make decisions about. Over and over and over again.
That's correct. It's a test of player agency.
And therefore, it's when you're running games, how much is it a test of player virtue?
Great question. So I think there's virtue as in skill, and there's virtue as in fortitude and courage. And I think all of them are involved. So let me give an example. Let's say we're playing a role-playing game, and my best friend's character that he loves playing and has played for 2 years together is about to get killed by a dragon. Okay, and if he gets killed, he loses the character. He's going to be devastated. And let's say I also know that my best friend just found out that his father has cancer and is dying, and he's horribly depressed. And so now a situation comes up where I could risk my character's life to try and save his character's life. And that, I believe, is not just a hypothetical, it is an actual test of virtue. Do you love your friend enough, knowing, how he'll feel, knowing he's having a rough day, whatever, to risk your character's life for his, right? That's an actual kind of an ethical question. And these sort of questions come up all the time in role-playing games because they're played with the same group of people continuously with the same characters for years on end sometimes. And so in a very real sense, Newton's endangered. My friend's name is Newton, right? Newton's endangered by the dragon, and so-and-so is deciding to save him. And when gamers talk about their best gaming experiences, it's often as if they're recalling powerful memories.
But specifically because you're actually in this decision moment, and you have to make a real choice about what you risk.
Yes.
So, in your game, you've been gaming forever.
Yeah, since I was 5. So. Yeah, I was a child. I was actually kind of a child prodigy of Dungeons and Dragons. I was like running games by the age of 7. I've often wondered why I wasted my child prodigy on Dungeons and Dragons instead of like chess or
that's what we're here to
playing
figure
the
out
piano
tonight.
or something. But yeah, I was a child prodigy of D&D.
Well, D&D is like chess, isn't it? It's strategic.
Yeah, but nobody. Nobody invites you to play Dungeons and Dragons against the world's most powerful supercomputer on national television.
Why not? Right. That's a really interesting question, because we're in this moment where we're suddenly like, do you think AI is going to take over game RPGs?
Wizards of the Coast thinks so. They've actually said they intelligent game masters so that you don't need real game masters anymore. You can just use AI.
Why play?
Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So I am somewhat unusual in how focused I am on player agency in my role-playing games. I've done a bunch of my videos have been about my player agency theory of fun and how important I think it is as part of the hobby. And I really think player agency is at the essence of what makes role-playing games great. A lot of people disagree, and they think it's just collaborative storytelling with your friends, or play acting, or, just rolling some dice and drinking some beer. And I think for those people, they'll be perfectly satisfied with an AI GM because they weren't getting a deeper experience in the first place. But I think if you were getting that deeper experience, then when you encounter the AI GM, you're going to be very disappointed.
So this is in the first of your video series, you talk about what people think about GMs, the game masters, and say, too many people think it's just the storytelling part. And I recognize that I think I sort of go into it with that. One, because, other than my one time playing Dungeons and Dragons, it's reading DM of the Rings, the cartoon.
Which is hilarious. Yeah.
Which is all about the players disrupting the DM's, desire to do the backstory and the, like, I've got this all mapped out and I want it to go the way it does. And no, we're going to shoot Gollum now. Right.
The author of that used to work for me at The Escapist.
Oh, it's hilarious, right? Yeah. It's like classic.
He's fantastic.
And so can you talk? It's like let's make the case, because we are here in the Mosaic Ark very committed to art and human storytelling, and also this I want to hear more about both what you think about the players and what you think about the game mastering and how it's because I'm interested in getting to what kinds of players you think you've shaped in your gaming.
Sure. So the sort of the line between the different styles of play, they're generally divided into what we might call gamist, simulationist, and narrativist or dramatist play. So the gamists want to focus on everyone's having fun rolling dice, moving miniatures around. The mechanics are fair and balanced. The challenges are fair and balanced, and it's a good game. Okay, so not dissimilar from what you'd experience playing Risk or something like that, right? It's a game, Warhammer. The narrativists want the story to be dramatically satisfying. And so, for instance, if a beloved character dies arbitrarily for no reason with their storyline unfinished, to a dramatist, that's a terrible thing that's happened. The game has been ruined. The game is about the cooperative storytelling. And then finally, to the simulationist, the game is about a world in which the players immerse themselves via their characters and they operate in the world. I'm a simulationist. Most GMs are not, most game designers are not at this point. Narrativism has kind of, and gamism more or less dominate the space. So I'm a little bit unusual in that regard. But when you take that simulationist point of view, agency becomes paramount, because what you're doing is you're trying to create a world with enough verisimilitude that they can fully immerse themselves and then make decisions that matter to their character, to the other characters, and to the world itself. And in order for that to happen, the reality of the game world needs to be objective, right? So let me give an example. Let's imagine your character is driving her car down the highway at night and sees a scary building to the right. Okay. Now, a narrativist GM would have no problem saying, "Oh, suddenly your car breaks down," because that's dramatically exciting and interesting. And now you have to decide what to do.
Right.
My car broke down. Okay. A simulationist GM would not do that, right? Because the universe doesn't change based on what he thinks is dramatically interesting. Simulationist GM he'd roll the dice and see if your car breaks down every 100 miles or whatever, right? There might be a roll, but it wouldn't be that kind of rigging the world to tell a better story. And some people want the world to be rigged to have a story. Just like some people would prefer to go to an amusement park than go on a safari, right? Where you get a controlled experience versus, oh shit, I'm, running from lions now. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Well, it's so one that I remember. So I remember when you showed me the structure. I think what you were showing me the ACTS files, right? And you had all of this data, right? Maps and
Yeah.
economic data and history and such. And it was delightful to me because it seemed like world building in a better way than usually when people are doing world building. I feel like in storytelling context, it's simply verbal. It's nomenclature, right? And they're all wanting to be Tolkien, so they name all the stuff. Whereas you were, it was very statistical in your thinking through what would you need for this world to actually function.
Correct. That's the approach, and that's kind of the secret sauce in my games that makes people buy them, right? And a great example is, imagine you're playing a role-playing game and you decide you want to raise an army from the countryside to go slay the dragon. Well, okay, so now you need to know how many peasants live in the countryside. Is there another lord who's going to not want you to raise his peasants? When do the peasants farm? How much free time do they have? How many able-bodied young men are available to recruit as conscripts? How long does it take to train them? Where do you get the weapons to equip them from? How much does it cost to get those weapons? How long will it take? Like, who's training them? Where did you find the trainer? All of these questions. And no games answer that except my games.
And that's when you were describing the 2 minutes, like, this is like the kinds of questions a historian will ask to really understand,
or an economist,
a historian or economist, and like that you have to have it's not just concrete, but the full system has to be real. I'm not saying it well. Your example is better than my abstraction, which is a good point.
The difference is a historian will say something like, unfortunately, we don't actually know the exact ore configuration of a quadrime.
Right.
And there's this possibility and this possibility, right? A game designer, you can't do that, right? Like, you can't be like, hey guys, nobody really knows what a quadrime looks like, because they're supposed to get on a quadrime. And so you actually have to make a firm call. You have to say, I have decided that a quadrime is a bireme with 2 rowers per oar. Done. Right. And so, so in a sense, like, I've actually built, it's very funny, I've built a more robust and fully detailed model of the Roman economy than most of the social historians who are modeling that sort of thing do. But that's because they are compelled by academic standards to not just make shit up. Whereas I will be like, well, I don't really know the answer to this, but I have to have something. So I'm just going to pick a value out of thin air and see how it works and modulate from there.
Okay, now that shot me off in another thought. It's like, so if you look at what happens in your games, does it match better or worse with what actually happened in history based on the scenarios that you're starting from?
Yeah, sometimes it matches, sometimes it doesn't, because small differences can lead to big changes. The ultimate goal is not so much to have the game reflect our reality, but to have the game reflect a consistent reality, right? So that within that game world, it makes sense.
Okay. All right. So, but then, then the parent question I had of all of that is what happens to the people that actually play your games, character wise, and you gave us that very poignant description of what happens if someone's having to make choices within the game that are also your friendship
Hmm.
with the people playing.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
it sounds to me like if you play your games dark as they pretend to be, you end up with a real sort of like exercise in what the consequences of your choices.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, ideally so. Um, the game is structured. It's not so much that you can win or lose, but rather for any given character, you can advance in power or stagnate.
Mm,
And advancing in power can mean being a wizard and learning more spells and new types of magic. It can mean, being a hero and gathering a large army or establishing a kingdom. Like there's different ways to advance in power, and the game models all of them. And then stagnating would be, you have unsuccessful adventures and you lose money and you don't get your new castle built and et cetera, et cetera. If your character gets killed, you still haven't really lost the game because you can just create a new character. And there's actually some rules in my game, Adventure Conquer King system, to reward what we might call a virtuous self-sacrifice. It's called the heroic funeral rules. But basically what it says is that, if you die heroically in a heroic manner for a noble cause, then your friends can give you a heroic funeral and your new character starts off more powerful. Right. And so it creates an interesting situation where, let's say you've got all the characters are really badly wounded. They have to run away. But if everyone runs away, they'll all get killed in the pursuit by the enemy. Right. But nobody wants to be the person to volunteer to die. So what do you do? Well, so in the real world, we had that justified self-sacrifice. Like the Crusader says, I will die and I know I'll go to heaven because I'm dying for Christ, right? Or the jihadi feels the same, or the Viking who feels he'll go to Valhalla. So we wanted to simulate that as well. So we actually simulate that by saying if you die heroically, then your next character is more powerful.
So your son inherits your
Yeah, it can be your son, your brother, your best friend, whatever, is sworn to be Inigo Montoya and avenge his father, like whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was Casey. I'm dominating here. You should jump in when you.
No.
Okay. Going back to the question of like what Christian. So we have Silent Draco saying Saint Martin de Tours, Saint Louis, Saint Ignatius Loyola would view pacifists oddly. Right. So we do have some sort of military saints in the Christian tradition.
Definitely. Yeah.
But what I was specifically thinking of is, I mean, the main thing that people have to deal with in the present in our own like social circumstances, and presumably this can come up in a game in a gameplay, is simply behaving well, sitting around a table, right? Like manners and being able to deal with. I mean, the turn the other cheek, I think, is actually more about dealing with insult than with attack, right? It's
Right.
You're insulted and the person slapped you, and I mean, it feels to me like the kinds of gestures that men used in more recent, it's like I demand satisfaction, and if you get slapped
Right.
and you're being egged on to get angry, then what Jesus recommends is don't take that bait, right? Don't take the bait of actually responding. But on the other hand, this is my second one, reject false binaries. Don't let yourself get caught in stupid questions that, I demand that do you believe in Genesis literally? Yes or no? Answer, right? And you're just like you're constantly trapped. We are socially in our conversations now by
a cross-examination rather than a conversation.
Right, but often with the emotional valence of you must agree with me or else you're stupid, or you must agree with me or else you're evil, or you must agree with me. And it's like, and it's all this emotional bullying, right? And then the third rule that I gave in this scenario was pray for your enemies. That despite the fact that you're being egged on to respond emotionally and get trapped in false binaries.
I'm laughing because I'm saying resist the temptation of saying I'm gonna pray for you, right? right? When they're trying to egg you.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm wondering, it's like how you finally grain all of the things in your game system to deal with the external world. How much does either the system or the play itself get you to practice these other kind of virtues?
It depends on the game. My games don't model that stuff very much. There is a game, for instance, called Pendragon, which actually does model the virtues and vices of your characters. And it can be the case that your character may be compelled to do something awful and then have to redeem himself because he's succumbed to one of his vices. Or because he is pursuing one of his virtues, he becomes more powerful, right? So there are games that do model that. Some players don't like those because they feel it impinges on their volitional control over their character. Others really enjoy it because they think, in real life, I succumb to temptation all the time, so it makes sense that my character would too, and that's something he sometimes has to wrestle with. In my game, the Adventure Conquer King system, the only time that sort of stuff happens is if either magic is used on you so as to sway your will, and sometimes get traumatic injuries to the character, been corrupted by attack your friends when you roll badly on the dice, things like that. And what's interesting to see is, you'll have a group of friends, they all know each other, they're all buddies. They know that Poor is set up that if he rolls a 1, he attacks the guy sitting next to him. And yet when it happens, they still take it really personally. Like, I can't believe you attacked me, man. And he's like, what do you want me to do? Like, I didn't choose to roll a 1. He's like, yeah, but I still blame you for killing me. And so it's very funny. It's very funny. Yeah. You very quickly, I find if you play in a really good role-playing game, you learn a lot about your friends, and it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun.
That's what I'm thinking. It's like, so what do you think because this is going to get us to this, you have this Trinitarian theory.
Right.
Who's Saint Gygax? Who is that? You said
Gary Gygax is the creator of Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay, so that there is you perilously modeled for the Trinity on this, but your other claim is, the important thing about these role playing games is their player volition, right? So it's free will, within certain constraints that are the world acting on you, and I was sort of when it tests, like, at what point is there, because you've also used in your discussions of the God version of things where Satan fits, and I want you to explain that for everyone. But if Satan's testing you for what, right? It's that's a sort of tricky thing. Yeah. But it's so this we have had in the unauthorized world big debates over the Trinity. Friendships have been fractured over it.
Oh no!
Oh no! Oh yeah, it's a don't go there. We won't name names. But it does.
They need to read your essay. It was excellent. I thought it explained it very well. I was impressed with it.
Saint Gygax. So what's interesting is I got actually kind of condemned for that one.
By whom?
By a few Christian friends. Not like harshly condemned, but just like, hey man, you kind of missed the boat on that one. Because they said I had actually presented a heretical Trinitarian theology, which was, I believe they called it aspectualist, because they argued that I was treating God as 3 different aspects of one being rather than 3 different persons.
I thought you were describing action, but anyway, I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, anyway, so, I'm certainly no expert in Trinitarian theology. That article was just me kind of riffing one day about what it's like to be a game master.
I thought as I was reading it, it gave a good explanation of what you would see, how you would see God's different actions, not different aspects of God, but just actions on the world that he created.
Right. Right.
It's kind of, as Rachel and I have discussed this before, and I think on the Mosaic Ark, it's when you're talking about, you can't really directly describe God because he's unfathomable. You can only describe, what happens when he acts. You can see it, like you can feel the wind when it blows. You can see what happens. You can't see him. But I thought it was very good. But again, I'm no theologian either, but I'd never heard of that particular heresy they mentioned.
I had not either until it was mentioned. So then I looked it up and I was like, oh, I guess it's a heresy.
Ah, darn.
It did show up in the 9-minute description of heresies as they clearly had watched that the Zoomer guy who's doing. Well, okay, so but maybe if we work through it and we'll find out what a game master is, which is I think an interesting director image, right? What you're saying, Alexander, is if people are not actually, would you be bothered by having an AI game master? That's like saying we have a robot maker, right? Why would anybody want that? I mean, that seems to me the first thing about the game master as also game designer, which I think is game master is it's volitional on the part of the designer too, rather than just some AI generated system thing.
Yeah, so the way I argued it is that the game master, the GM, first off, he is the game designer in a sense, right? The cosmos is governed by the rules that he has created. Players learn those rules and act accordingly. Okay. That's pretty clear, right? Like I actually got that idea from Vox Day, who in his book, The Irrational Atheist, when he talks about God as a game designer.
We wondered who was first. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, no, it's straight out of Vox in that regard. But typically, when people think God as a game designer who've read Vox's book, they think a video game where you have a coder and he's typing in a keyboard and now he's created, and you get a lot of talk of, we live in a simulation and the simulation creator is God. Right. What's different between a video game and a role-playing game is that the video game exists somewhat independently of the player, right? Like he can walk away from the video game and the game is still on, it's still running, it still exists. A role-playing game exists only in the moment of the interaction of its players. If we all get up from the table and leave, the game stops. There's no action and the world vanishes for a little bit. And so what that means is that at every moment in time, the game master is sustaining the world through his words. And it was that idea, sustaining the world through his words, that made me think this is what God does, right? Because God didn't just create the universe and wander off, he creates the universe and he sustains it at all times. And that's why God is actually a tabletop role-playing game designer and not a video game designer. So the third thing then is the idea of the game master non-player character. So non-player characters are the people that populate the world that are under the control of the game master. And my idea was, what if the game master self-inserted the game master as a character in the world, who literally shows up and says, hey, I'm a character in this world who's also the game master of the entire world, and how would people react to that?
That cool.
And that's more or less the Christ figure, the third leg of the Trinity in my conception. And that's where I got accused of aspectualism because there's actually still only one person, which is the game master, who is playing the role of or taking on the aspect of a GM NPC as compared to a separate person.
Well, usually when the online guys get into Trinitarian debates, they are. If you stray at all from the creedal formula, you're in trouble. That just it's like,
no, and
the all analogy. I mean, even Augustine's analogy of the will, the memory, will, and is it reason, right? That I think is that doesn't work either. So Augustine couldn't do it.
Right.
I'm not sure why we think we can.
No, I mean I think I think their criticism was fair. Like I think I probably am an aspectualist heretic. I would prefer to not be burned alive at the stake or something
Well,
over
only
it. But
Calvinists will do that if you're Severitas, right? So don't worry. That's the
right,
only.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm probably
we can wonder about what we should do with heretics otherwise.
yeah. It's always a tricky problem. What do you do with
But
heretics?
you're Greek Orthodox, right? So you're out of the scope in this particular. But
Right,
you
that's
had
right.
several
That's right.
more layers though. You take so God created the universe ex nihilo from nothing. So God is a world builder
Yes.
and setting creator, which I mean this to me in the sort of backing up in why we make art. This is one of my main themes when I teach my Tolkien course, and
Yeah,
yeah, the
subcreation.
subcreation
Yes.
and what Dorothy Sayers talks about with the only thing we know about God is it's through his self-revelation, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And the opening statement of his self-revelation is in the beginning God created. Okay, so God creates, right? And therefore if we're made in his image and likeness, create is the thing we do. We mirror his artifact, his artistry in our own desire to make, which I have yet to find anybody who can say that there's anything wrong with that, right? So step one, understanding
Mm-hmm.
creation is our primary mystery, our primary access to understanding God, that we have that desire for making.
Right. I agree with that. I think. What is it? I think I forget which writer it was. It might have been Wolfgang Smith, but he basically talked about the universe as a theophany. Yeah, and he said, in studying science, you come to see God.
And that the only reason we have science
right.
in the format, in the way that we do, is because the scientists were looking to see it in the second terms, cosmos, right? That it's actually ordered and beautiful.
Yes, exactly.
And so it's not just the maker, but you said a designer. It's governed by rules, which is a primary claim of scientific study, that you wouldn't be able to study. What rules would we be studying if it had no rules, or it had no structure?
Correct. Right. Yeah, they basically, from my view of scientism, is they took a Christian worldview and then just erased God, but kept all the, kept all the outcome, right? So, but prior to that, many civilizations believed that the world was chaotic and unfathomable and governed by the caprices of spirits. And so we have no default reason to believe that the cosmos is ordered and sensible, other than the fact that we've discovered that it is. But then why is that? Well,
but then that means that your exercise, I have the books, right? Because my name is in them. I supported a previous Kickstarter, right? Was it? Yeah.
That's right. Secrets of the Nether City,
which I'm showing on screen now, but this is the proof that I actually have the book, and I have the second book too, which is the
Capital of the Borderlands,
right? So
yes,
Alexander likes writing rule books, which have design and structure in them, and I mean that is another of the ongoing conversations we're having in our UATV Mosaic Ark world is on beauty. Where we're thinking about beauty and saying that this rule structuring is beautiful because it's I mean, cosmos is order, and that you have. I mean, you must have. I hope you take enormous pleasure making these games, because yeah.
I definitely do. Definitely. Yeah. What's interesting is a lot of times I'll design the games and then players ask me a question about some of the rules and I don't even remember writing the rules. Like a lot of times when I get really into a flow state and it just feels like I'm discovering rules very quickly and recording them rather than sort of making them up, which gets to be really awkward. And people are like, "Hey, on paragraph 3, page 77, why did you make this decision?" I'm like, I could not even tell you. So it's led to some really funny memes on my Discord where they're like, roll D6 for why Alex made a design decision. It's like 1, spreadsheet, 2, historical, 3, I learned it in a dream, 4.
That's funny.
Well, okay, now this raises an interesting question, like how God shows. In my class on campus right now, I'm teaching medieval Christian mythology, which is like the world building vision of medieval
Right.
exegesis of the scriptures primarily. And we were looking at the tabernacle yesterday, and all the instructions that God gives Moses on the mountain, and says, according to this pattern, you need to go build all this, and it's like, so many cubits and so much gold and the materials and everything. And does anybody come back to God and say, why did you say acacia wood exactly?
Right. Exactly.
Dear Lord.
What kind of
Why?
incense was that? And so there's it's interesting that your players are responding in the way that commentators do to the scriptures, which is why exactly was it this way?
Oh, for sure. In fact, it's very funny. When I I had most of my life, I'd never read anything theological. I only sort of started reading theology in the last 10 years or so. When I did, I was like, this is so interesting. It feels like it feels like they're treating the Bible or the Torah like a game rule book, and they're trying to like figure out the loopholes and min-max, and
Yeah.
and it just I found it really delightful. And I was like, I think I would have really enjoyed being a theologian in my spare time, because, this is exactly how I think about things. Like, I'm like, well, how do we, we got to systematize this. We got to understand what's going on. We got to figure out the rules,
Is that what led you to study law? Do you think?
It was games. Yeah, absolutely. I actually got into law school. Harvard Law School was my stretch school. I sent them a game I had designed, and they were kind of impressed by that. I was like their only game designer in the class.
Well,
that's
that
interesting
part. We know that God sustains all of creation by his word, and that his word is law.
That's right.
And
Yep.
therefore, yeah. So, I mean, that I at another layer. Last week we were talking about what goes on in Washington, and we were talking about the sacredest space, the Capitol building as the sacredest space. And I think we didn't say this last week, but there is a way in which in the United States, law is the sacred thing.
Right.
I mean, and
right.
all of the as we're thinking, I'm thinking too about how much you got into law school with your games. So your games are legal battles. I mean, that's the primary game that the United States plays is law, is word battles and legal battles.
Okay. Lawfare.
Lawfare, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Lawfare, yeah. I on legal matters on Tree of Woe, largely because I got blamed for causing an insurrection, and
what?
Yeah, I didn't want to get sent to Guantanamo Bay because of my Conan blog. So
should we ask?
You don't know about this?
No. Well, you can tell us about Gamergate. You were offering to do that. He's at Archon on X, guys.
I wrote this article called.
Can we ask you?
Called Trump at the Rubicon, and it was about how I felt that the Democrats, by suppressing the election lawsuits and constantly saying, it's moot, and not letting it get decided, and some of the other activities that were happening, that I thought they were positioning Trump, and with their talk of putting him in jail, putting Trump in a position analogous to which Julius Caesar had been put when he got told, leave your army behind and come home to Rome to face trial. Yeah. And Caesar said, screw that, I'll just march on Rome with my army. And so I said, look, this is the situation we've set up. And if we don't want this, then we all need to de-escalate and take a step back and give some time for the court process to work, et cetera, et cetera. So, so then what happened? Lefties picked up that article and they said, look at this incredibly influential blogger who is controlling the Trump right wing has promoted that Trump should cross the Rubicon and start a revolution.
I've not heard your name.
The puppet master.
Oh my! You literally have to look this up to believe it. Like, I'm reading it and I'm just like, wow! I wish I was that cool.
Get triggered again.
Yeah. So
you are, yes. Shh, don't get her started.
I really am.
But the thing is, it is interesting to me that of all of the things that have been going on, it's like the what happened on January 6th was about the sacred space of the law.
It was apparently my fault. Yeah.
Well, okay, but
it was the fault.
Stick with the religious level here. That there were these this feeling of energies affected by the event of the day, which is what we were talking about on our show last week. All right, so
Right.
you were involved. I mean, clearly, we're meant to bring you in here now, and you're going to explain your magic powers.
Yes, they're powerful.
Okay, all right. So we have ex nihilo cosmos, word is law, and then we know. Oh, I like this. The word is God. God didn't write down his game rules. The rules are not separate from God. Well, he did like speak them to the prophets, right? Or it's like they don't exist in a book, they exist in his mind. His game is run using word of mouth. I think you're going to need to revise that, because he does keep asking people to write stuff down.
No, he's asking them to write stuff down, but he's not asking them to write down. Okay, so it's interesting because, again, you have to understand how a tabletop game works, right? So when the player interacts with something, right, the interaction that they're having is with the game master, who is then describing to them the result of their interaction.
They're like Moses on the mountain. They get to talk to you face to face.
So in a video game, let's say in a video game, I click the mouse button to open the door, and then the video game then loads the data from what's behind the door. But in a role-playing game, the information of what's behind the door is in the game master's head. And so when I say I open the door, I'm having a conversation with the game master, who then tells me what I see on the other side of the door. That's what I'm trying to allude to, is that unlike a video game, a tabletop role-playing game is sustained in its existence only through the word of mouth between the player and the so
see, I think you didn't in your Trinity, you didn't include the spirit, and that's where this feeling of, I mean, it's like the communication.
Yeah, maybe. As I said, I'm not particularly a Trinitarian theologian, so I'm
Greek
sorry.
Orthodox, though, so we can hold you to this, because you Greek guys did philosophy and stuff. And
oh man, Greek Orthodox is like, God is apophatic. You should just go on an obelisk and meditate until you have a spiritual awakening. Don't even bother with this Aristotle and Aquinas.
I thought all those councils were in the East, and Nicaea and stuff.
They were. I don't know what happened. Yeah, no, the Greek Orthodox, they're all into spiritualism.
They all started like gazing at their navels and doing, the breathing exercises. That's what you got to go out into the desert and gaze at your navel, and eventually you'll find God. Or this is the great. We've had a great Hesychast controversy in our chat world of whether or not gazing at your navel and breathing in the circular fashion that Palamas and company suggests, which you should not do as a woman or without guidance, because the demons will get you. But whether or not they were simply hyperventilating and getting a material light, or whether what they saw was in fact the same light as Christ appeared on Mount Tabor at the Transfiguration. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you say it's the Trinitarian filioque. If we say filioque, will you like poof and turn into a mouse or something?
No. That's
our best spell.
Look, the only reason I'm Greek Orthodox is that my father was Greek Orthodox and he had me baptized Greek Orthodox. Like, I can count on one hand the number of times I've been in a Greek Orthodox church.
You just stole our favorite joke. We can't tease you with the filioque.
I'm sorry.
I don't understand the joke, so it's fine.
It's the procession of the Holy Spirit, whether it's through the Father and the Son, filioque and the Son. Yes, and that tends to be the one that gets, like, if the ortho bros get, which what you're saying is you're not an ortho bro, and therefore they're going to be upset about that. That they know that's the thing that differentiates the Latin discussion of the Trinity from the Orthodox, and so they just hammer on it. Like, you misunderstand the energies if you say the Spirit proceeds from both the Father and the Son rather than just from the Father.
That's right. That's a profound disagreement between the two faiths. Yes.
Which your image doesn't solve. Okay.
No, I do not purport to have solved any major theological issues on my Conan themed blog.
Is the contemplation of the Tree of Woe Conan?
Yeah, it's from the movie Conan the Barbarian. Conan the Barbarian gets hammered to the Tree of Woe, and Thulsa Doom says, "Contemplate this on the Tree of Woe." And then he's hung
Oh,
on the tree, and the vultures come to eat out his eyes, and then he bites the head off the vulture, and then the Basil Polidor soundtrack plays, and his friend Subutai shows up to rescue him. It's a very important 80s classic movie.
When I saw it, but I
remember that
closed
from
my
the movie.
eyes because of the brain soup. Or whatever. Isn't there some soup where a
Yep.
head's floating
Yeah.
in it? Ugh.
Yes, there
I don't
is. That's
care, but I
later
knew
in
I
the
wasn't
movie.
looking.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when Conan goes to attack the Mountain of Power, and he finds there's an orgy happening, a cannibalistic orgy, and there's a head floating in the cauldron of soup. Yeah, and then he.
Oh, I don't remember that. I'm torn. Should I watch it, or should this like turn me off?
Well, it's Schwarzenegger in
so
his
good.
early days when he hasn't.
It's so good.
I do remember.
You have to watch it.
Speak English.
Oh yeah, I remember watching Red Sonja as well. That was really bad.
Red Sonja is not good, but Conan the Barbarian. Conan the Barbarian was actually it was written by John Milius and. Sorry, no, it was directed by John Milius and written by Oliver Stone. Like it's actually like really, really talented team, and it's got a lot of philosophical depth to it that people miss because they're just basically paying attention to Arnold being Arnold.
In soup. Come on,
but it's actually got a lot of really interesting themes to it. It's one of my favorite movies. So that's the name. That's why it's my Conan theme blog, Contemplations on the Tree of Woe.
Okay, that's completely shifted my imaginary about what it was, the blog. Anyway, my favorite part of the movie, which I do think I have to credit with, is that sense of the antiquity of the cities that he, as the barbarian, is going up against. That's brilliant.
Yes.
And that feeling of, I mean, as a historian, was my sense of it. And even, at the University of Chicago, where we are no longer Oriental Institute, the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures, that anything that we have even there in the study for ancient cultures of Assyrian, or I think that's the oldest stuff we have. Maybe do we have some, we have some Sumerian stuff. Conan is saying it's, there was civilization even older than that. Is very cool.
Yeah, that's the premise.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Which then, as okay, getting back to our theological meditation, saying, at what point does humanity have this knowledge of God? And I thought with Conan, you get this feeling. You get this feeling. It's like huge antiquity of mystery and I mean, if contemplation on the Tree of Woe, just this contemplation of we don't know. That feeling of vastness of the you could probably say it better because you know the movie better, but it's so ancient and so remote and
so the
inaccessible to us in our puny little knowledge.
Yeah, the author who created Conan, Robert E. Howard, wrote kind of a prehistory of the world in which, and it's called the Hyborian Age, and that's when the movie and the book and all of those are all set. And the idea is that before he says, before the rise of the sons of Arius, which is supposed to be, before the Indo-Europeans, before any of that stuff, you had this Hyborian Age, and it was destroyed in a cataclysm, which then leads to our age. And there is a monotheistic godlike figure in Conan's world. He's called Mitra, and he has priests, and he's essentially the good god of the world. All the other gods are more or less portrayed as pretty malevolent. It's interesting. Like I think if you could certainly, if you wanted to make the argument, you could make the argument that Mitra in Hyboria is essentially a theophany of God as we know God. So.
Well, that's what we're going to get to the Michael part, which will. Oh, and here we are. Now I'm showing your Borderlands map. What's the Borderlands? Tell them a bit about that.
Oh, what's the Borderlands? The Borderlands is the setting for the Adventurer Conqueror King system. It's a region of the Aran Empire, which is my ersatz Roman Empire. It's a region of the Aran Empire where the forts have been denuded of their soldiers because they've been sent off west to fight. And so you have these big forts, but they're largely empty. The trade routes are getting perilous. Monsters are coming out of the dark forest to attack. Evil is on the rise. and enter the adventurers, and what do they do? And I've run the Borderlands many, many times for different groups, and it's interesting. Sometimes the groups more or less abandon the Borderlands. Sometimes they take control and secede from the Arran Empire and form their own state. Sometimes they defend it, to their dying breath. It's kind of neat. So
this makes me so with the Conan theme, which I apologize, I had not appreciated the depths of history feeling that it feels like Tolkien was playing with that intensely with the whole point of Middle Earth was saying it's like this deep history. It's the history that we don't have access to.
I do the same thing.
And we did not review this for our discussion, but I think probably you can explain it. The Orcs.
Oh, yeah. That was a nightmare. Thank you for that.
How the Orcs are
the Orcs in terms of
real, right? The monsters coming out and getting in even before Conan days.
Yeah, it sounds like what he took it from.
Well, no, but Alexander's theory is that they're real.
No, it's the archaeological evidence. Until I read your article, which is very good. I guess I subscribed to the NPR view of Neanderthal. They were very peaceful, and we just completely overran them because we were barbaric, and
we're the barbarians. No idea they're the monsters.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I have no idea where they would have, why anybody would have assumed that. So, especially not
right, if you look at them, they're these robust, heavy-boned, humanoids. We have evidence of essentially a pure 100% meat diet. We have evidence of cannibalism. We have evidence of heavy battle damage and constant warfare in the skeletons. They lived in Ice Age Europe, which, if you look at lots of hairless animals that were in the Ice Age, were hairy, right? Like woolly mammoths. Elephants are relatively hairless, but woolly mammoths. And so you're like, well, humans didn't even have good technology to be able to create buttons and things like that for a long, long time. Do we really think that these guys that evolved in hairless apes? No, they were probably really hairy. And so then you suddenly realize that, in fact, in primordial antiquity, historic man confronted these prehistoric humanoids that were stronger than him, they were faster than him, they were tougher than him, they were covered in hair, and they were scary as fuck.
Yes.
So,
and to see at night was the creepiest thing.
Yeah, again, we don't know for sure, but they have these huge, if you see the skulls, they have these huge eye sockets. And there's a lot of other primates that do have eyes like that can see at night. Basically what the guy, the author of the book that I based that article on, he makes this point that reconstruction of fossils, they usually get it really wrong, right? Like a reconstruction of the hippopotamus, they would, it would be like the most horrific monster you can imagine, but actually it's got all this fat on it.
It'll still eat you, though.
Yeah.
It'll still eat you. Yeah. Because they don't tell us anything about the external or soft tissue of the creature. Always skin tight, no hair. It looks totally different. The skull and body of a bear, skull and skeleton of a bear looks very different from what we think of as a bear, right? And so his point was he thinks they've basically gotten it wrong in their reconstruction, and that in fact, these were not Fred Flintstone. These were terrifying monsters. So
they were orcs. Yeah.
They were orcs, right? Yeah, exactly. And given that orcs do in fact show up in all world mythology, like clearly somewhere, I believe clearly somewhere along the line, we confronted something very bad.
Okay, so we'll go back to, we're dragons and orcs, right? We have your ruined city of Kifander, the dragon on it. And then the Borderlands and the Conan and the deep history and the monsters. This is a sort of question I fall into, which is, I think one of the things that trips Christians up is, so why does it take Jesus so long to show up in the game? Right? You think about,
wasn't an accident.
Okay, now we have ascended. this is the other feature of history, being there's all of this human history beforehand, for which we have very little written evidence. So we don't have any of the stories. We just have some, like ruins of walls and bones and things like that. We don't have none of the stories. That the Old Testament stories feel like they have more backstory behind them, that there's something super duper ancient even behind them. So for example, in the Psalms, you have the Lord, on his throne above the waters, fighting monsters. Right? The Old Testament,
right.
This is where people are always getting the Old Testament God, I think, completely wrong, because one, they just see him as a God of vengeance because his people won't obey him. And I'm like, okay, that, and then current political events, the degree to which he favors one group taking over the land of another one. But this is being another of Jesus's teachings, like don't take vengeance, right? Don't get caught in those vengeance cycles. But the thing is that behind all of those like immediate stories is this terrifying mythological figure who is, enthroned on flaming wheels with, carried by four-faced creatures, and he's, sitting on a sapphire throne, and his glory is coming out. And hopefully we're going to the next article we're going to talk about, Michael the Archangel. It's like our imagination of who Jesus is fits with his NPC entry into
incarnation,
the Gospels and the incarnation, and I like this one. After entering the campaign world, Jesus founded a party with 12 players in the game. He let them know he was God and began to give them quests. Like most players, Jesus's party members didn't write any actual play reports at the time. Later, some of their henchmen tried to get it all down, but there was some inconsistency in their reports. Very true, right? That our sense of the incarnation is so historical, right? It's like he's there, in the Roman Empire, in this there's miracles and things like that, but there's talk about the diminution of power, right? In my mythology class, we were talking about the conversions of the Anglo-Saxons. I'm saying, so the guys, they show up from Rome, and it's like, what do they tell King Ethelred? And it's like, well, there was, this preacher. It's like, what? Like, where's the like flaming swords and and power and such? And it just feels to me like there's somehow, and this is, I think, where our imagination stories end up. It's like we end up with dragons and angels in all of these fantasy stories. And let's talk about your argument about Michael, which I found very fascinating for reasons I will explain after you explain your Michael reading.
Oh,
yeah,
sure. Oh, yeah. So, my view in a nutshell is that I think Michael is a Christophany. I think it's the same person. They are the same being. Which is not to say that I think that Michael is a created angel, but rather that Michael is Jesus, is the God. So, which is the Seventh-day Adventist view, strangely enough. And what I found really remarkable was when I started to investigate this, is most of the critics who attack this claim that Michael and Jesus are the same being attack the Jehovah's Witnesses view, which is that Michael and Jesus are the same being, which is a created being created by God. But they don't ever really attack the Seventh-day Adventist view, which is, that Christ is exactly who Christianity purports Christ to be, but that before he showed up on earth, Christ was not just sitting around in heaven doing nothing. Like, he was at deeds, and the form in which he was doing those good deeds was the form of Michael, the archangel. And what particularly struck me was, I'm a firm believer in warfare theodicy. So I think the explanation for evil is that there's spiritual warfare with evil powers. Okay. And what has always struck me is that, Satan is supposed to be prince of this world, and he is supposed to be so powerful as to be the explanation for an enormous amount of evil that mankind has to endure. And yet we're to believe that Michael is just one of many angels. In some theories, like archangels are actually really low on the spectrum of angelic like power, like they're like powers and thrones and all these, and like archangels are way down here. We're supposed to believe that this awe-inspiring, terrifying figure of evil was tossed out of heaven by one of the archangels.
When you say it like that, it's
like it's like, okay, well, what was Jesus doing when the war in heaven broke out? Was he just like, hey, you guys
Right.
have a good time, let me know how it turns out? Was he like watching it on ESPN, like, oh man, I can't wait till Raphael gets in the game? Like, no, like what was going on here, right? And it seems pretty clear to me that what was going on was that Michael is Christ, and what's terrifying about Satan is that he was the most powerful created being in existence, betrayed God, and so of course the only person with him would be God, because if Lucifer was the most powerful created being other than God, then Michael couldn't throw him out of heaven because he would be less powerful. So, yes.
So this
is my take.
And I actually found a picture saying qui sut Deus, right? So who is like God, which is
who is like God,
his
right?
name.
Which is Michael's name, yeah. And the answer is the only person who's like God is God.
Okay, so I'm actually fascinated by this because you get into trouble for your Conan blog. I get into trouble for my theological writing. When I was working on my book on the devotion to Mary in the Psalms, right, which is why I'm very interested in the way the Lord is shown in the Psalms, because in medieval devotion, the hours of the Virgin are all saying psalms, right? So you're describing this creator who she held in her womb. I mean, never mind about the NPC character somehow ending up in the game, right? It's like somehow he the same guy, if you're saying, the angel God, right, enters through her into the material world, and getting a real sense of his power, right? That I came across the work of theologian Margaret Barker, who you would love her work because one of her earlier books is called The Great Angel. And it's specifically going through all of these Christophanies in the Old Testament over and over and over again, as in fact the angel. And in your article, you point to a number of them that theologians actually cite, right? And even like Calvin in the Old Testament, he even in Calvin talking about where is the Lord in before the incarnation. Well, he's acting throughout the Old Testament. Many events which we're saying the Lord did this. Calvin would say, yeah, that's Christ. That's Jesus there, right? So there is no separation between the action in the Old Testament and the action in the New, because they're the same characters. On the other side of the equation, there are Jewish scholars who agree that, in fact, the Jews before Jesus's time believed in this. that there are Peter Schaeffer's done a book called The Two Gods in Israel, and there's this whole angelic tradition is incredibly important, particularly in intertestamental, between the Old Testament and the New Testament, temple imagery, right? That there is El, the God, right? And that's the El name,
right?
And then the manifestations of him, and there is a second God. So all of this sort of in order to be truthfully whatever, you have to be monotheistic. It doesn't hold for ancient pre-Christian temple worship. There's even more layers. That's just the start.
Wow.
Yeah. So you're Michael sort of theorizing that you came to it out of a different direction. I stumbled on it because Barker is trying to figure out how the earliest Christians are in fact carrying on what they see as the ancient tradition, which includes this, among other things, that the angels are all to a certain theophanies. That's why they all have El in their name. Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, Uriel, Rachel. No, wait, I'm not an angel. Right, but the El is a suggestion that there's some way that they are participating in the divine in complicated ways, and that they're a plurality in the unity, and that feeds into the great mystical traditions.
Also, I've also heard that when God speaks a command, his command becomes the angel that carries out the command.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I don't know where I heard that. Sorry, I'm not a scholar, but
well, it's the problem
that kind
of
of
what
makes
the
sense.
word is, right? And the God speaking is like when God sends Gabriel, it's his speaking, the Hail Mary, right? The greeting to her, and that is God speaking directly to her. But the angel as messenger, it's never mind the sort of the way the Trinitarian persons are in relationship. That the angels are somehow also part of the heavenly interacting with us.
You know, I don't know if you read my articles I wrote on Hypsisterianism. I was trying to reconstruct the theology of the Hypsisterians. So the Hypsisterians were a monotheistic cult that's recorded in a couple of the early patristic writings. And it turned out to be very interesting because they were effectively pagan monotheists. And one of the things that what they found when they via archaeology to be much more widespread than had previously been supposed. The prevailing opinion had been that the Hypsisterians were just the God-fearers. They were just Greeks that had converted to Noahide laws and sort of were non-Jewish Jews. But they ended up finding like all this evidence of the Hypsisterians, whose name comes from Theos Hypsistos, or God Most High. They found evidence of them all over the Mediterranean, predating interaction with Judaism. So, or the Hebrews. So the question becomes, all right, well, you know, who are these folks and what do they believe? One of the things I discovered is that they Theos Hypsistos, and that all of the other gods of the pagan world were, they describe them in two ways. Is they describe them as angels of Theos Hypsistos, but also as actually part of Theos Hypsistos, in exact counter, you know, the Trinity or angel Christology. So I found that really fascinating, that there was this very strong indigenous monotheistic angel theology in the ancient world.
So monotheism is a tricky word that is used in the 17th century first, right? Creator. Let's say creator.
Sure.
and that, I mean, everyone worries about the oneness, and what most medieval discussion, well, I mean, they do end up in Trinitarian debates and stuff like that, but the first thing they're pointing to is creation. God, there's a creator. The world is a creation.
Right.
And the oneness of God, then it's interesting to say, well, I mean, Plato has an idea of a oneness of a creator, but it seems to me that the primary theological problem is understanding that there is a creator, and that everything else sort of falls into place once you accept that as the reality, that there is this beautiful creation that we are participating in. Rather than, I mean, it's like the pantheon gods, they could be angels, they could be demons, you know, the multiplicity of these supernatural powers or something like that. But there's no order, there's no beauty, there's no like created cosmos if you're like got a committee doing it. Who how do you think about that, right? Either it's chaos or it's a committee. No, it's clear there's a creator.
I mean, you know, I don't put it past the powers of God to actually run a good committee meeting. I'm sure he's a wonderful chair god.
Please.
But, you know, I mean, look, you know, if God told me to come up with a blueprint for a new animal species, I would do my best and hand it in. That's all I'm saying. I wouldn't.
But no, but that's saying that this is the problem of creator and creature, right? You could have, and Tolkien plays with this well with the Aenir, right? It's like the degree to which they are like his first creatures, his thoughts, his, you know, it's like, how do we get the multiplicity of our experience of reality with the one creator, the unity of the creator?
Yeah. So are you familiar with the work of Christopher Langan on unbounded telesis? Okay. So Christopher Langan is reputedly the smartest person in the world with some IQ over 200. And he's a pretty interesting figure. He's kind of far right wing. He's like a grumpy New York bouncer who has no college degree, but he's genuinely super intelligent. I've chatted with him on Facebook a couple times. I was in his Facebook group for a bit. So anyway, so he has this, he calls it a theory of reality. What he says is, think about nothing. And this blew my mind. I've been very powerfully impacted by this. He says, we think about nothing, and we think about nothing as meaning no matter and no energy. But that is not nothing, because that still says that there are the natural laws under which matter and energy operate, and or the natural laws that prevent there from being matter and energy in the absence of matter and energy, et cetera, et cetera. He says, actual not just the absence of anything, but it's also the absence of any constraints, because constraints are something. And so he calls that unbounded telesis. And so he says, when you imagine unbounded telesis, then you realize that because there are no constraints, everything is possible. And because everything is possible and you have no time, no limit, no constraints, then it becomes real, which is where God. So God is a spontaneous, self-created emergence that is inevitable if you actually are able to imagine nothing, according to Christopher Langdon. And so then, having emerged in the unbounded telesis, in the Bible is sort of abstractly, the kind of the chaos that God wrestles with in some of the Psalms. He then creates the world and creates the constraints. He brings order to the nothingness and creates. And so like you end up with this kind of like God creating from chaos and God creating from nothing collapse into the same cosmogony. Anyway, I wrote an essay about it. If you want to read it, it was pretty.
We have further investigation to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the site. It's called Convergent Cosmogony.
You sure you're not a theologian? You keep playing. So here's your exercise for the moment. How do you put the Saint Michael character into the Jesus character?
You lost me. Ask the question a different way, maybe.
Okay, so the thing is, I accept the reading of Michael as being so I think we have got a lot of Michael pictures. That in the original sort of battle in heaven, we have Satan thrown out, and you're saying how could that be anything other than God himself casting Satan out? Which makes sense. And then as you were saying that, I thought, well, that is also, here we go, what Jesus does when he at the crucifixion, right? Which is beat Satan again.
Yes.
And the theological question is always, why did he have to become incarnate to save us? And because these like your Michael image, which I as I say, I find, thoughtful and persuasive, does tend to suggest though that, why couldn't he come with power and take care of our game?
Yeah. So, I have some really heretical views in this regard. So I don't know if I should go into them or not.
I don't know how much trouble do you want to get into with whom?
I don't want to invite the Spanish Inquisition to arrive at my home.
I think it doesn't exist right now, so I think you're okay.
I'm probably safe then. All right, so I have a couple thoughts on this. So one of the things I noticed in my Bible readings was that at many times Jesus seems to speak as if the kingdom of heaven is absolutely imminent, right? Like you're going to see it in your lifetime. And my understanding is that that actually caused some confusion and a lot of sort of communal action by the early Christians, who then were very puzzled when it didn't come right away, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so we have this kind of strange thing, right? Like he talks about like it's gonna be really soon now. Then of course now here we are in 2024 and it hasn't come yet. Okay. Then we also have this really interesting parable where he talks about these people that are they're made the tenants of an estate and they have a contract with the landlord, but they don't do what they're supposed to do. They don't run the estate the way they're supposed to. And he keeps sending the messengers to be like, you got to run the estate the way we contracted. And they keep shooing off the messengers. And so finally, the landlord sends his son. Like, surely if I send them my son, they'll do what they're supposed to do. And when he shows up, of course, they kill the son. And so then he says, so now the landlord kicks them off the property. So in my head, I kind of wove those two together, and I came up with this idea. And again, this is a huge heresy, so I'm hellbound for this one. I came up with this idea.
I think
that
denying Jesus Christ as Lord is the primary one that we're worried about. So as long as you don't do that, we're good.
When Jesus comes to Earth, the original plan, or at least one possible plan in God's chess game, is we're actually going to bring about heaven. The Judeans, their Messiah is here. They just got to support the guy, do what he says. We're bringing the kingdom of heaven. And then they're like, nah, we're not into that. We're going to kill you instead.
Oh,
and so then
it wasn't in the plan to be crucified. That's in that, in the Psalm, in Psalm 21, it says, that he's going to be humiliated and things like that. So
my view of God's omniscience is that God is like a chess player who has solved chess. So he knows every possible move. And no matter what you do, he will win the chess game because he has solved chess. He knows every possible move, but he doesn't necessarily know what move you're going to play. He simply knows every possible move you could play. And when you play that move, he knows every possible move that he needs to play in order to win and have the outcome that he wants. So he's in total control.
Solved predestination versus free will. Well done. Wait.
Thank you.
Well, so you have actually, maybe not the predestination part, or have you? You've just solved something really important, because we're always saying, oh, well, what if we do this? Well, God still knows the whole game. I like that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or another way about it is, there's this whole quantum theory of consciousness and quantum collapse from collapsing the probability wave, and until you do that, everything exists in a superposition where it's both a particle and a wave. It's both in the box and not in the box. It's alive and dead. And so one way to think about it is that more or less the future of the universe exists in a superposition, and God has empowered us to collapse that probability wave. But at all times, to him, he continues to of all the future possibilities at every moment, and can make his decisions accordingly, so that his outcome always gets what he wants in the end, even though he gives us the freedom.
I think Hans needs to talk to you about particles and waves. That's beyond me. I like the chess game.
Yeah, Hans. I can't understand Hans. Unfortunately, he's too smart for me. So
he's explained to me the particle that thing, and it doesn't work the way he thinks. Well, anyway, but the game, God is going to win the game no matter what, but we still have freedom to move within it. That makes sense to me. I like that.
Yeah. So that's my answer to that question. And so God plays the move of, hey, the way I think about it is maybe God is a little annoyed. He's like, I keep sending you my prophets, you keep ignoring my messages. Like, what do I got to do? Like, every time I turn around, you're golden calves and blood sacrifices. Moloch shows up again. I'm like, come on.
The baby sacrifices are bad. The animal sacrifices, when I'm reading about it in the tabernacle, it's a big barbecue, for goodness sake.
Yeah. So I think to myself, okay, so maybe he's like, look, this is going to be their come to Jesus moment, right? Like, they're going to decide, do they get the kingdom of heaven or do they not? And if they don't, then they're off the reservation. I'm kicking them off the tenancy. And that's what happens. Yeah. So that's my heretical theory.
Okay, that's cool. It still doesn't explain why Jesus doesn't come. Here we have Michael in golden armor, right? He looks like C-3PO, killing. Why doesn't Jesus come in power? If we know that he had to fight Satan, and so we have the sort of mythological, in the sense of heavenly backstory of the war in heaven. Why, when God interacts with us, his players, does he become an NPC rather than just manifesting in armor and saying behave?
I think it's best in armor and says behave, perhaps it would deprive you of your free will to choose.
Would say, choose me or
if
die.
someone comes up to
there's
me,
a choice.
right, choose me or die. Yes, exactly. I haven't solved all theological problems yet on my Conan blog. Yeah.
Okay, so we've
Well, I
got the
think it's
creator,
related
we've
to-
got, the angel. This is good. So far, so good.
Yeah. All right. So what else?
Casey
Hit
had a
me with
question.
another
We have
question
one.
here.
Yes, we have one more theme.
Oh no, I had a comment. I think it's related to your observation that Michael was one of the weaker angels, and the story or the event, Satan getting kicked out of heaven, which Christ said, "I saw him fall like lightning from heaven," is that Satan's sin was pride, and he was defeated by humility. So consider that Michael is the smallest angel and the weakest, and he defeats Satan because God mirrors that in his first coming to be crucified. He defeats Satan through humility. And that's
Sure.
my theory.
That makes good sense to me. I won't burn you at the stake for disagreeing with me.
Thank you.
I don't even have a
The
stake.
burning at the stake is because heretics come in and they disrupt society, right? Which we'll talk about another time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They disrupt civil society.
Yes. Right. And you get stuck. Well, anyway, we're not going there right now. We do have, although we do have the Dark Lord now promising to deal with the how is this what it means to fight wolves, right? Okay. So now we have the level of power we wanted to talk about, because Casey found this one that we were very interested in a theory of magic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to introduce that one, Casey?
Sure. So my essay, When Magic Was Real, is that what you're referencing? With Dean? Yeah, sure. So Dean Radin I was reviewing his book essentially in that article, and he wrote this book called Real Magic. And
he's PhD.
what he says is
in?
he's a PhD, I believe, in psychology. He's a parapsychologist. He's been a researcher in paranormal for many, many decades. And the whole time, he's been a very, very strict scientist about it. And so he's done probability studies, statistical controls, double-blind testing. He's done everything he can to kind of distance himself from the idea that this is something supernatural. It's like, we are tackling this on a scientific basis. Right. But then
I did see that.
Finally, it's such a great
movie.
But finally, he comes near the end of his book, and he's like, you know what? It's magic. Like, let's just admit it. We're talking about magic. Magic is real. This is how it works. And there's one, and the whole book is really good, but there's one particular study in the book that just blows my mind. And it's this one. So they get a box of chocolates, and they find a purported, magic user, a purported wizard, and they ask him to bless half of the chocolates to cure depression. Okay, so half of the chocolates have been blessed. They then have their test audience, which is people that have been diagnosed, and they split them into multiple groups. Okay, so there's the first group gets blessed chocolate and is told that this chocolate has been blessed to cure depression. Okay, so they have magic chocolate and have been told that they have magic chocolate. The second group gets given real magic chocolate, but they're not told that it's magic chocolate. They're just given chocolate. This will help you with your depression. Okay. The third group is given normal chocolate, but they're told magical chocolate. This will help cure your depression magically. And then the final group is given normal chocolate and told it's normal chocolate. Okay. So we have real chocolate and we have magic chocolate knows it's magic chocolate and doesn't know it's magic. Normal chocolate but thinks it's magic, and normal chocolate and they think it's normal chocolate. And so the question is, which group or groups has their depression improved? right? Which one actually gets a benefit?
Well, I'll say,
And he says, if you think,
I've got the chocolate. Do you see this? This is
yeah,
Vosges Haut Chocolat, alchemical, mindful, ritualistic, and sacred. And this is Parmesan,
yep,
walnut, and fig, a gift of chocolate caramel. But it comes with instructions on the magic of cacao, including what they harvested and blah, blah, blah. Our cacao is sourced, cultivated, and harvested ethically and consciously with loving and positive intention. Only it gets better, right? We infuse all of our chocolates with 528 hertz sound frequency known as the love tone.
there you go. There you go. All right. So what Dean Radin would say is actually there might be something to it, because the outcome of the study, and this is where my mind blows. So you're thinking, okay, well, obviously what's going to happen is that the people that are told it's magic, the people that are told it's magic chocolate are going to have their the placebo effect, right? Like that was what I was expecting to have happen. But that's not what happens. It actually is only the people who get magic chocolate and know it's magic chocolate have their mood improved. And so and what Reedon makes the point is, he's like, this is why paranormal studies are so difficult to replicate under traditional scientific methodology, because state of belief is part of what causes the effect. And so therefore, if you are a skeptic, you will not be able to replicate it, even though it's a real effect. And if he's right on that, then that's a big mind-blowing phenomenon. So I have myself, occasionally dabbled in nothing like occult, but like, definitely positive intention, writing down affirmations and things like that. And I have found them shockingly and irrationally effective. So I'm a believer at this point. There's something
I know
going
this
on.
Chocolate's better than anything else, and I do feel better when I eat it. So it's
I'm
been
salivating for that chocolate.
over Vosges Haut Chocolat. Yeah. Well,
Under a full moon by virgins. Yeah.
I'm literally salivating for that chocolate.
Love tone. Through the pleasure of eating or drinking cacao, you are put into a loving, mindful state, allowing you to come into your physical body with a sense of calm, bliss, heightened focus, and concentration. Cacao has the highest frequency and potency to dial you into your sensuality, creativity, and generosity.
Mm.
And if it doesn't, you need to eat more of it.
Yeah.
It comes in order form.
Yeah, it will dial me into my potbelly.
Okay, no, but the thing is, you gave in the article, you gave some nice tests, right? And this one I will read, because I thought this was so we say skeptics in Dungeons and Dragons carry an anti-magic shell everywhere they go, so they never experience magic. But what if things changed, right? Imagine that Pfizer is working with the FDA on a clinical trial of its new magical ED pill, Viagra Cadabra.
That was pretty inspired.
Imagine that the trial consists of 20,000 sad middle-aged men whose wives don't love them anymore. Half the men are given real Viagra Cadabra, which is a sugar pill enchanted by Pfizer's chief alchemist. Now, this, of course, because in Mosaic Ark's bigger identity as Dragon Common, we were writing a story called Draco Alchemicus, so we catch on everything about alchemy. The other half of the men are given fake Viagra Cadabra, which is just the sugar pill without the enchantment. One half of each group is told they're taking Viagra Cadabra, and the other half are told they're taking a placebo. The men who knowingly take real Viagra Cadabra have literally miraculous regain of sexual function. The effect isn't huge. Sorry.
What can I say?
But it's real enough to notice in the statistics, you pig. Pfizer is cleared to bring Viagra Cadabra to the other 150 million men in the United States. Pfizer's chief enchanter, who runs marketing, decides to invest $5 billion into a marketing campaign. Marketing campaign matters here, right? Rather than promote the efficacy of Viagra Cadabra, however, he decides to promote the efficacy of magic as a whole. Ask your doctor what magic can do for you. Blah, blah. And then this sounds all utter ridiculous, except it's already happened. And
right.
And this I think, we just lived through this of a great deal of Viagra Cadabra and people's willingness to believe that the pills they take actually work. do you want
Yeah.
to talk about that? You say the effect is widely documented with some categories of drugs experiencing 300% growth in the power of placebo. Why is it happening? Because we've actually,
Is it
because
the
of all that you said, it's because of all the drug ads that the United States has.
suggestion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what Radin ultimately says, and it ties into some kind of wonky theories of quantum mechanics, but essentially that reality is not fully fixed, right? Reality is kind of a superposition of possibilities of the future, and it purely random which superposition becomes reality. So an example. You know, you can have a random number generator that uses particles to randomly determine numbers, right, based on decay of radiation or whatnot, and it's random, and so they do these tests, and it should be over a long enough trial. It should be 50% -1 and 50% 0, right? 50% negative, 50% positive. But when they actually ask people to concentrate on the quantum random number generative, then it like slowly becomes 51% positive, 52% positive, 53. And when they've really looked at it, it's well beyond the likelihood of chance. And so they conclude there's something going on here where we're able to control those probabilities through our conscious intention. And so that's the alleged scientific basis for, intentionality and magic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And again, it all sounds ridiculous until you actually sit down and you read some of the studies and you're like, okay, this is actually kind of persuasive. So, I mean, I was 10, 15 years ago, I was a staunch atheist, materialist, it's all bullshit, total skeptic, blah, 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 blah. And now I'm like, I'm a wizard. So.
Well, or you're a faithful Christian.
I've been things, but not that.
But that, I mean, so what's interesting to me about this is like belief. It's faith, right? It's like
it is.
It's not even belief. It's faith.
It is. That's correct. Yeah, and if you buy into Dean Radin's view, then it becomes pretty interesting to understand the difference of white magic, gray magic, and black magic, right? Whereas white magic would be intention will be done.
Right.
Okay. Gray magic would be focusing your conscious intention on, hey God, I don't know how you feel about this, but like if you're down with it, hook me up with some bread or whatever. Okay. So you're kind of asking God for a favor rather than doing him a favor, right? That would be gray magic. And then black magic would be absolutely know that this is not what God wants, but nevertheless, this is the conscious intention that you pursue with your mind. And so those would be, that would be how it would play out, like if Radin is right about what magic is.
So going back to faith, I mean, black magic is going to be getting those demons to work with you. I mean, it
could be that as well, but I was just thinking like strictly focusing on Radin's theory where it's manipulation of probability, the engineering of coincidence, etc. Then the question is what you are engineering in line with God's will or not in line with God's will?
Well, that's where things get very scary, and that's why Jesus' teaching is so incredibly powerful. It's like he's teaching you how not to get sucked into that, which is hating people.
Right. That's right.
And praying for your enemies as being the one of the absolute primary lessons, because if you allow yourself to get sucked into the revenge cycles, you start desire, it's like what you're doing is curses, right? Witches don't get burned at the stake. Heretics get burned at the stake, and they only start burning witches when they decide that they're heretics because they've made a deal with Satan, which is a different sort of problem. Right. In the Middle Ages, the primary concern with actual magic as evil is mainly with curses, right? It's maleficium. It's the cursing, which you can say with Radin's theory. It's like it's bringing this. If we say it's negative energy, then people go, "Oh yeah, woo." You are directing hate at someone else and wanting to bring
Yeah,
that.
yeah, for
and,
sure.
And there is fairly good anthropological discussion on how that's also a phenomenon people observe everywhere.
Yeah,
Almost like
yeah, for sure.
voodoo,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Right.
voodoo. Yep, yep, yep. Absolutely. So, yeah, I don't know. I was pretty persuaded reading Radin's book and a bunch of the other studies. There's also some really interesting stuff you can get in the CIA archives, where because
I have a book Hans recommended. I still need to read it on that. Yeah.
there's this fascinating thing where like President Carter is says, "Hey, President Carter, this airplane has crashed and we can't find it." And he's like, "Okay, well that makes us look bad. We got to find it." And they're like, "Well, we do have a secret of psychics. We could ask our psychics to look for the plane." And he's like, "Okay, let's try that." And so then they like, "Hey, Mr. President, the psychics found the plane." And so Carter like actually talks about this openly. He says, "Yeah, we actually had psychics working for the CIA, and they used their psychic powers to locate the airplane." And they're like, "So are you saying?" So he's like, "Are you saying you believe in psychic powers?" And he's like, "No,
I want
no
to
comment.
be
Thank you."
skeptical here and say maybe the CIA knew where the plane was, and this was just a ruse to get the president to approve a higher budget for their program, right?
It was it's such a tiny budget. It was irrelevant, right? Like it was like the guys that were in the Portland talked about it, and like they were like in a room on a college campus. I mean, yeah,
Which college?
Maybe Princeton.
Oh, okay.
One was in Stanford, one was in Princeton. So Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research was one of them. Yeah. Anyway, it's called Project Stargate. It's really neat. They have a ton of discussion of it. The Russians also invested a lot of money into it. They called it psychotronic studies. They claim to have had some really big effects. You can find these CIA papers where they're basically worrying about the psychic gap, right? You got the nuclear gap. Now we've got the psychic gap.
How long did that program run?
Why don't they understand the faith gap or the prayer gap or the holiness gap?
I mean, if you want to know my answer to that, it's because they're on the other team.
I think we know now, right? Well, no, it's so that's as we're talking, I'm thinking this hasn't gone away, right? I don't think the magic has gone away because people still have belief in all sorts of stuff that we just don't label as your Viagra Cadabra joke shows. We still do this with I mean most of our medicines. That there was a video I saw on Telegram, which basically defines my life right now, where a woman is talking about all of the poisons that were in things in the 19th century, like the green dye and the lead and the this that, and he was like, amazing anybody survived, and it's very easy to do a description of similar sorts of things now, and the willingness that we have to go to. This has also been a continuing theme for us, so it's one of the reasons we were excited by your article. The willingness to go to all of these sort of drugs and powers and the spices, right? That's our spice theme in Draco Chemicus of the Radin article adds a level of like why did they have any effect at all, rather than, or can they have a positive effect even if it's dark? That's a tricky part, right? Because Vox will talk about that. It's like if you take the ticket and you're on the other team, you're going to get kicked off. You're going to get thrown from the horse eventually. The other team does not play fair.
Right. Right.
I'm curious how far we're going to take this in the sort of the because the psychic powers, they may be undetectable when you're the Ghostbuster lab. Bill Murray's lab, but that they're real out there and that we're feeling them all the time.
Well, I think we're under assault all the time by advertising, which was well known when I was in college in the 80s, that if you studied psychology, you were going to go into advertising. That's pretty much what you did.
Spell casting.
Because because it was valuable to try to convince millions of people to buy.
Yeah, there's an Italian professor who he died under really chances, who wrote a book about magic in the Renaissance, and he concluded that the direct descendant of Renaissance magic was modern advertising.
We agree.
I believe it. Yeah, totally believe it.
So would you say
pretty...
your game practice has helped you resist the real sinister magic?
No. My fear of absolute damnation has helped me resist that.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
And wait, how do we resist? What if you cast a shield for us? What would the most important thing be?
What do you mean?
How do we resist eternal damnation?
Oh, gosh. I'm told that apparently it involves a Messiah and some faith and like a sacrament.
Oh, guess what? We can say Jesus Christ is Lord. That's Amen.
Amen. So fill me in. What's the whole thing like? There's like a fight going on my Twitter feed right now between Jesus is Lord and Christ is King, and I'm like,
oh, I'm so happy
what?
You don't know.
Like, what's the deal?
I
genuinely don't.
Our Lord is King. It's all true.
The Groypers, and this is now we're in the after party of the conversation, because this is the part we have not planned.
Okay.
Thank you for going through the articles with us.
Yeah.
So the Groypers, 3 or 4 years ago, right? One, they were following E. Michael Jones a lot at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think. And there was Dave Riley, who had a question of, now I forget who he was talking to, but he was holding a rosary, right? And a feeling within the conservative side of the conversation that we are going to stand with Christ, right? And say Christ is King, and they were motivated by that. So all the Groypers in the America First, Nick Fuentes crowd have been saying
that crowd,
time. I'm not. I
did
think
not realize
Jesus is
I didn't
Lord,
realize it
because
started
that's
with them.
like the definition of, recognizing Jesus Christ is the Lord of the Old Testament, Yahweh, Adonai, Kyrios, right? Dominus. It's like the identification of who he is, which is what we've been talking about tonight. And yeah, so I don't know who else is saying that other than me. But the Christ is King stuff is the Groypers exulting.
I did not know that. Okay, that explains
but there's
it.
more.
Okay.
Do you want the rest of the specifics of why they're doing that right now?
Yeah, hit me.
Because Candace Owens got fired from Daily Wire.
Right.
You know about that, right?
Right. Okay. I do know about that. Yeah.
So they have a sense that she, in being unwilling to say the words that she was being demanded that she say, has stood up for our actual faith. We have a take on.
Yes, she did.
What was the words that she was unwilling to say?
That the attack
I'm so lost.
on October 7th was uniquely evil, and the uniquely is the word that's necessary.
Right. Okay. Right. She was not willing to say that, right? She was willing to say it was evil, but not uniquely evil.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Gotcha. That was why she got fired.
Well, I suspect there's layers to it.
Well, she defended her Christian faith at one point during the exchange and said, "Your religion does not trump mine," because the implication that he was making, he was very strongly trying to get her to say this, was that, yes, his religion was uniquely important.
Right, which is why the unique
and she wouldn't do it, and she very, very strongly defended her faith in Christ, and then she got fired for that, I think.
Right. Well, old business partner of mine didn't think much of him either. So,
these are deep waters with monsters in them, and we'll fight Leviathan another night.
yes, indeed. We will not talk about the deep magic the deep lore.
There's deeper and deeper magic. But I mean, what we are committed to on the Mosaic Ark is at least helping people understand what it means to say. I mean, we haven't tonight. I don't think we did the Christ is King, which is a different layer of the problem. But Jesus Christ is Lord is a claim about Jesus's relationship to exactly what we were talking about. It's like, how does he act in
Right.
power?
Right. As compared to Christ as king, which is a different
Is a different
assertion.
kind of assertion. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you know, it's the what Paul says regularly in his letters is Jesus Christ is Lord, and that's making a claim about his identity as the Adonai, as Adonai, as Dominus, as Yahweh.
Yeah.
So it's I mean,
Yeah.
and I say that in my Marrying the Art of Prayer book. It's like that's one of the reasons that it's controversial, I think, and why Margaret Barker was so helpful to me, because she's saying that is the ancient faith. That's the faith of the early Christians, which is saying Jesus is the incarnation of Yahweh.
That's really, what was the name of the book again?
So the author, it's Margaret Barker, and she did a whole series of
Margaret
books.
Barker.
The Great Angel is the one I think you'll enjoy.
The
Yeah,
Great
because
Angel.
she's
Okay,
and
thank
but
you.
then the thing is, there is Peter Schaefer, who's at Princeton, did the Two Gods in Israel. Is that the title?
Okay.
He's also done other other books on Jesus in the Talmud and the Shekinah, the feminine presence of God, and things like that. So he has his footnote on Margaret Barker in the Two Gods in Israel is quite delightful, because he's saying, well, you know, she says a lot of things and she says a lot of other things, and it's hard to know how to take them. Because she gets so enthusiastic about all layers of this vision that she's had.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the primary thing that she says, he verifies, which is there is this, you know, pre-Christian tradition within the Hebrew religion of there being this angel character, the Son. Right. And so the Son of God to be the, you know, the part of the divine. Monotheism is not actually a feature of the tradition until the early modern period, when they start claiming, they start defining themselves in those terms. It's a different sort of problem. Claiming Jesus as Lord is the huge difference in antiquity, because you're saying he is in fact the Lord.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the Christ as King is, for me, it feels like it's making a political claim that is not the same thing.
I agree with that. I agree with that, because when you're saying Christ is King, you're suggesting that therefore society ought to be structured, you know, in like a Christian dominionist sense. That is, you know, a political sense.
And I think we're nowhere near a political configuration in this discussion.
No, I don't.
Right.
I don't think so either.
Right.
Yeah. Even the Vatican isn't is hardly a theocracy anymore, I bet. It's probably subject to all sorts of miserable EU regulations.
Yeah. We're going to have you back on, and we'll talk through all of this even more dangerous stuff.
No.
Well, I don't know.
Don't get me in trouble.
Unfortunately, most people get to the point where they just hear a thing that they've not thought through and they panic. And that's what one of our practices in the Mosaic Ark is, to try to talk through this stuff, so you get to a point where you're able to hear it first and then think about it. Yeah. Right.
Well, you know, I don't usually panic. My wife says that I'm rarely wrong, but never in doubt.
We've dealt with men like you. No, you don't panic. We're saying the sort of general panic of the conversation, which it thrives on that sort of panic. Yeah.
No, it does.
And you know, but the only response to that is get more popcorn, right? Because everybody's you know, desire, and it's a bad. I think it's, you know, it's like if we're going to have a game, let's actually have one with like some more complicated structures. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, so we've spent the time that we promised to take with you. Do you feel
thank you for having me on this show. I do. Yeah, like I feel like I really should go confess sins or something now. I mean, that was,
well, at least your heresy.
We have not made you sin. How dare you suggest that we drew you into sin? We are ladies of virtue.
No. No. You've simply inquisited me.
We have no authority whatsoever to
Inquisitive?
decide whether or not what you've said fits in the magisterium's.
See? The magisterium.
Yes.
Yes, your stern magisterium.
No, we don't do that. We don't do that. We're ladies. We have this is particularly when the Catholic bros get all involved in their Pope fights, and we're like, we're girls. we don't have any say in that. You guys go figure that part out. We're here praising the Lord. Thank you very much.
That's hilarious.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much for joining us, and everybody.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Check out his games. We will link. We'll link various things, right? The Conan blog and the gaming site, and go watch Alexander's videos. He has many more insights into being a good storyteller, being a good judge, being a good adversary, and there was a fourth one that I forgot what it is. World builder, right? Praise the Lord who praise the Lord in his creation and in all his creatures.
Man.
Good night. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.